BenQ released Palette Master Element version 1.3.12, and there's a lot to talk about. So let's go. I'm Art, and Art is right. Before we start, subscribe if you're new and hit on the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I upload cool new videos like this. I'd like to share with you a few reminders and my testing methodology. If you'd like to skip ahead, I'll leave timestamp in the description below. Starting out with Palette Master Element, I highly recommend that you download the past few previous versions and archive them on your own system. This way, if there is a release in the future that has a bug and that does not calibrate your display properly, you can easily downgrade and go back to a previous version. I have links to all these versions in the description below for both Mac and PC, and these are links from official BenQ servers. However, if you try to search on a website, it's not really easily to find these versions. In fact, you can't even find them at all. So you can use these links right now, download them in case they remove these from their servers. Next up, when you launch Palette Master Element and there is a new version available, you will get a dialog. Would you like to download and install the update? I highly recommend that you click on no, especially if the current version that you're running is working just fine. There are a few exceptions to this. For instance, if there is a major OS update or a major driver install, this is the reason why you may want to consider upgrading, or if there is a bug or a new feature that is released with the new version that is going to make a big improvement in the way how you're calibrating your current display. Otherwise, just click on no and use the current version that you have. This is going to be the safe method to run Palette Master Element. Now let's talk about testing method. There are 6 BenQ SW display models, including the SW320 that has been discontinued. These are a lot of displays, and if I have to test every one of them, it will be almost impossible and require a lot of time. So what I have done is group these displays into logical generations, and I'll share that with you in just a moment. The device I'm using for this calibration test is the X-Rite i1 Display Pro and the i1 Display Pro Plus. Both of these devices are colorimeter, and they are the best device based on year of testing to calibrate any type of display, including the BenQ SW display model. If your workflow involves any printing, the X-Rite i1 Studio color spectrophotometer is going to provide you with an amazing value. If you need greater control, the X-Rite i1 Pro spectrophotometer series are going to be an amazing device to calibrate any of these BenQ SW displays. Something to remember if you're using a color spectrophotometer to calibrate these displays is that it can take up to 2 to 3 times as long as a colorimeter to calibrate these displays. So if you want great result quick, a colorimeter is going to be the way to go. This being said, there are a lot of devices that are compatible with Palette Master Element, and I have many of those devices in my studio. However, to run a compatibility or run a test for all those devices for both Mac and PC and the 6 BenQ SW display models is going to be impossible. So if you are using another device with another SW model, and if you run into any issues, leave me a comment. Let me know the device that you have, the specific model of the device, the SW display, the computer you have, whether that is a laptop, a desktop, what's the OS version that you're running on. And, if I have that device in my studio and I have time, I'll run some tests on you and give you some feedback. Whether that is a bug or not, we'll find out. But, if, like I said, if I have that device and I have time, I'll help you out. All right, that being said, there's one more thing I want to cover, and that is the X-Rite other colorimeter device. That is the i1 Display Studio. That is not compatible with Palette Master Element, and it's not compatible with any other third-party software. So if you're calibrating these displays professionally, don't buy that device. Now let's talk about the SW display model and breakdown and how I've come about this. So I have separated this into 3 logical groupings, starting out with the original, the next generation early display, and the USB Type-C generation. So let's start out with the original. We have the SW2700PT, that is the OG. And if you have one that is manufactured between 2015 to 2016, you're running on the previous, or what I call the old firmware version. And there are some limitations with Palette Master Element, which I'll go over in just a moment. If you want to know which BenQ SW2700PT you have, look at the regulation tag on the back of the display. This is where you have the serial number and everything. What you want to look at is the MFG date. If your MFG date is between 2015 to 2016, you're running on the old firmware version. And no, there is no way for you to really go in and update the firmware. That's pretty much going to be it. None of these SW displays have post-firmware updates. So once they leave the factory, that's pretty much it. Now let's talk about the next generation early display. This includes the SW2700PT. However, the firmware of this display, or the manufacture date for that matter, is 2017 to present. and this is what I would call the current firmware. This also includes the SW320, SW240, and the SW271. And part of the reason why I call this the next generation early display is because this is where the SW lines start to have more of its defining features, such as the stand and the base that is really specifically designed for this model, the infinity edge on 3 sides, as you see with the 2 displays that I have behind me here. And then what we have is a USB Type-C generation, which is pretty much the latest flagship that you have right now, which includes the SW270C and the SW321C. Now let's talk about these generation and break down a little bit further. So with the original and the next generation early display, what we have is a 14-bit lookup table that's built into the display. Moving on to the USB Type-C generation, this built-in LUT has been updated to a 16-bit. And these are the reason why I separate them into these different groupings, because the way how Palette Master Element works to calibrate a 14 versus a 16-bit LUT model is slightly different. The other thing that we need to remember is that the original SW2700PT with the old firmware can only be calibrated using panel native as the RGB primary. Moving on to the next generation and the USB-C generation, you can calibrate that with any RGB primary and it will work just fine. So you can use panel native, Adobe RGB, sRGB, Rec 709, just to name a few. Let's talk about what's new in 1.3.12. So for macOS, it adds support for macOS Big Sur. So if you already update your computer to Big Sur, that is what you're going to have to use, 1.3.12. If you're on the previous version of macOS, you can certainly run any of the previous Palette Master Element version just fine. On both Mac and PC, there are a few changes to the interface and the way how we would use the program. For example, it has a new black point setting where relative is now gone. What you have to do is go in and dial in a nit brightness value if you don't want to use the absolute black, and we're going to talk about that. And it also removes system distribution for both Mac and PC, which in previous videos I already gone over, and it really doesn't do much in any of these modern operating systems. So what you see there is Palette Master Element version 1.3.12, and you can see in red there, the black point, you have the selection between absolute black, and the other thing is just the value for the black itself. By default is 0.5 nits, but we're going to talk about that more, and I have a number that I can recommend for you that will be better than 0.5. Let's talk about Palette Master Element version and SW display compatibility. Starting out with the SW2700PT, if you're running on the one with the old firmware, manufacture date 2016 and before, 1.3.12 is not compatible, very similar to 1.3.11. 1.3.10 and 0.8 are both compatible, and what you have to do is, again, you can only calibrate this using panel native. So if you're running on a Macintosh system and you have the SW2700PT with the old firmware, I highly recommend that you stick with the current operating system for the time being. Don't update to Big Sur yet, just because it's not yet compatible with Big Sur. If you have the SW2700PT with the new firmware, this is the one, or the current firmware, this is the one with the manufacture date of 2017 and after. It's compatible with all of these versions of Palette Master Element, and it also can be calibrated using any RGB primary. And if you're wondering, the reason why I don't include 1.3.9 is because there is a major bug in that version that caused the LUT that being written to display not to be written completely, and it has a lot of weird advert effects on it. So that's the reason why I'm not including that version in any of my slides. All these versions will calibrate any other BenQ SW display model, and you can choose any RGB primary and that will work just fine. 1.3.12 still contains the fix for the Adobe Color Shift bug. For instance, when you're in Lightroom, if you go between library and the develop module, if you have graphic acceleration turned on in 1.3.8, if you use any RGB primary other than panel native, you'll see a color shift. However, that has been fixed since 0.10 and that fix is still there. And let's talk about stability a little bit. So I know 1.3.10 is a really good stable version, 1.3.8 also really stable. I mentioned this before that 1.3.11 produced a slightly higher delta E on the same machine using the same, calibrator than 1.3.10. And regarding 1.3.12, so far in my testing, it has been stable, but I put that down there as further testing in progress. So I'm going to continue to test this once I release this video. So if you have any thoughts or anything like that, leave them in the comments so I can get more feedback from you as well. All right, let's talk about the PME or Palette Master Element profile type and black point. And this is something that we need to concern ourselves with. So with macOS right now, we talked about a logout bug that causes a system UI crash, and what it does is it locks you out to the login screen. This is still happening in version 1.3.12, and the only version so far that is safe from this is 1.3.8. And the safe profile type for a Macintosh system right now is to use matrix. If you have gone out and calibrate your BenQ SW display with Palette Master Element and you use a 16-bit LUT and it works, that's really awesome. But from my testing, I was able to produce this bug. So if you want to avoid that problem altogether, use matrix as the profile type. If you're running on 1.3.8, you can still use 16-bit LUT and you're fine. For Windows system, there is no profile bug or anything at all, so you're generally safe. The recommended profile type for Windows system is going to be a 16-bit LUT, as I always do. Black point recommendation, and this is where you get a sneak peek of a number that I'm about to give you, and that is 0.1 nits. If you're using 1.3.12, if you're using any other previous version, relative is still going to give you the best scaling for both Mac and PC. All right, this being said, let's talk about this a little bit more and black point. What happened if you choose absolute, and what happened if you stick with the default value of 0.5 nits for Mac and PC? If you use absolute for both of these, what happened is you get really good black. The tonal scaling is better than 1.3.10 or 0.11 if you use absolute black. However, the darker tones still get crushed when you use absolute, and that's something to really consider. The thing though is that if you choose the nit value and you use the default value of 0.5 nits, what you get is really muddy black that almost looks like really dark gray on both Mac and PC. The scaling, it's good. It's equivalent to 1.3, 0.11, or 0.10 in relative setting. However, that muddy black is really going to drive some of you crazy. In fact, it really drives me crazy, so I don't recommend that. On the PC side of things, it's still muddy black, less so than on the Mac side, but still doesn't look quite as good. So what I've done is more testing, and I've come up with a good recommendation for that. And this is a number that you already got in the previous slide, and that is use 0.1 nits. So with 0.1 nits, what I found is that for both Mac and PC, this produced a really good black, and it produced a really great scaling that's better than absolute. So if you're going to run the calibration using 1.3.12, I highly recommend that you go in and change the black point to 0.1 nits, and this is going to do wonders for your calibration. If you ever want to test out another value, please do so. If you find something better than 0.1, let me know in the comments below, because I like to know and run the test on that too. Now let's talk about the best and safe calibration setting for Palette Master Element for both Mac and PC. If you're running on Mac, you can use ICC Profile version 4. If you're running on PC, ICC Profile V2, and you can see there on the chart, we're going to just focus on 1.3.12. Best setting for Mac is going to be Pano Native, 0.1 nits, and Matrix as the profile type. For PC, you're going to use Pano Native, 0.1 nit, and 16-bit LUT. You're going to notice really quickly that 0.1 nits serves as a replacement for relative black in 1.3.12, as you will see continuously here. And safe setting, Adobe RGB, 0.1 nits Matrix for both Mac and PC. And if you are using DaVinci Resolve to do any type of color grading, Rec 709, 0.1 nits. If you're on Mac, Matrix profile type. If you're on PC, you can certainly use 16-bit LUT. You'll be good. Don't forget to change your gamma to 2.4. This way it matches with the Rec 709 color grading standard. And the reason why I put a separate category for DaVinci Resolve user is because the Resolve doesn't really color manage either on a Mac or PC, so it's really relying heavily on just the display output itself. So once you calibrate that on the display, you'll be good. So a couple of things to note is that the red cell, those are settings that I haven't really done any testing on, and the one with the asterisk, those are all the 0.1 nits. In my testing, this tends to work fairly well. However, I would highly recommend that you go in and run your setting with absolute black versus 0.1 nits and see if you see a difference and which one will provide you with a better result for calibration. So far, what I can say is 0.1 nits is the great magic number for you to use in 1.3.12. Here are a few recommendations and wrap-up thoughts. If you don't have to update Palette Master Element, don't do so. Stick with the current version that you're using. If you already updated to Big Sur, well, then you have to use 1.3.12. But 1.3.10 and 1.3.11 are really good known stable versions. So those are really great versions to fall back on, provided that it is compatible with your operating system. Don't upgrade unless there is a major bug that you need to fix, or there is a new feature that you really want in the Palette Master Element, because the previous version, if you have a good calibration already, just stick with it. And lastly, I have a computer with an Apple Silicon, the Apple Mac Mini coming. So I'll run some tests on Big Sur and Apple Silicon and talk about the calibration with Palette Master Element then as well. So results still pending on that. All right, that's pretty much it for this video for 1.3.12. If you have any questions about this, leave them in the comment section below. Give this video a like, subscribe if you're new, hit on the bell to be notified when I upload cool new contents like this. And until next time, ArtIsRight.